This is the Knowledge Graph Insights Podcast, episode number 52. Knowledge management and data engineering were already changing even before ChatGPT arrived. Now, with the proliferation of AI, the boundaries are blurring between structured and unstructured data and other knowledge assets. As a partner at a prominent knowledge consultancy, Lulit Tesfaye sees every day the implications of this change. Chief among them, the need for semantic layers built for interoperability on a solid foundation of industry standards.
Welcome to the Knowledge Graph Insights podcast, where experts on knowledge graphs and the semantic web share their wisdom with the digital and business communities. Our mission is to demystify and democratize knowledge graph technology and practices to make the benefits of knowledge graphs and semantic technology accessible to all. And now, here's your host, Larry Swanson.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to episode number 52 of the Knowledge Graph Insights podcast. I am really delighted today to welcome to the show Lulit Tesfaye. Lulit is currently a partner and vice president of knowledge, data, and AI solutions at Enterprise Knowledge, the big famous consulting agency in the DC area. She's also the co-author of the recent book, or maybe forthcoming, I'm not sure, but I've seen it online, so I know it's coming, Bridging Knowledge, Data, and AI, Harnessing the Semantic Layer Framework to Drive Intelligence, which she wrote with her co-authors from her colleagues at EK. Well, welcome, Lulit. Tell the folks a little bit more about what you're doing these days.
Thank you, Larry. Thanks for having me. I'm happy to be here and have been looking forward to this conversation. That's a very kind introduction, so I appreciate that. So maybe a good way to start would be a little bit from the journey, without dating myself, I'll say I've been in this space close to 20 years at this point. And it's been not a direct or linear path, given how, things are evolving. But the short version of it is started in working within software engineering and applications for data and information in that space. Which led to me joining Enterprise Knowledge after I met the co-founders about a decade ago. And then our focus was in knowledge management primarily, which traditionally is considered as learning and development or training or kind of relegated to librarians, so to speak, right? Information architecture and so forth. But over the past 5 years specifically, we've been seeing a big shift towards the silos, in a way, dissolving between the different types of these groups within organizations and where information or knowledge sits. So we think in terms of structured and unstructured data, unstructured being content, PDFs, and all the things that you have in your files and folders, whereas structured data has been traditionally for data and analytics teams. And the biggest swing that we have seen, thanks to especially generative AI, is that unstructured data, which is really 80-90% of an organization's, I would call it, knowledge asset, came into the purview of data teams, data and analytics teams, because of generative AI. And that was what has what led to this big focus on knowledge management for data, as well as handling structured data. So I think we've all gone through the pilot phases for PoCs and pilots for AI, the pilot purgatory, all the failed efforts. That has been the journey, especially over the past, I would say, 5 years, is working with organizations that have been experimenting and embracing AI, or today trying to wrangle what we call the AI pilot sprawl, a scenario that exists. So to give you an example, one of our clients recently said we just cataloged over 150 pilots, AI pilots, and we haven't seen the return on investment as we should. Good experimentation, good learning, but we need to put an end to it and have a strategic path. So this is where we are today. All the pilots and POCs, for many different reasons that I can get to, either have failed or have stalled. And at the same time, there are a lot of things in production that I would commend the organizations leading that. But the biggest failure and a big part of our journey has been the backbone, the core, the semantics or the context for AI as the lens that AI sees your organization. That has been the core of it. Just to answer maybe in a long way what we've been working on over the past few years.
Yeah, I think the first time I met you, you did a talk about the semantic layer at that data summit in London, the one that Henry Stewart Events puts together. And I've been following your work about semantic layers since then. And that what you just talked about, that's kind of the classic sort of framework that people use to connect this, like the data stuff you're talking about, the KM. But I'm really curious, one of the in the knowledge graph world, everybody talks about knowledge engineering, and what you just described seems like the setting the stage for a big shift from knowledge management to knowledge engineering. Does that make sense? And if so, how does it fit in how you see with things right now?
It does. And I think maybe the best way to answer that would be to take a step back and really define what we mean by semantic solutions, or specifically a semantic layer. Because I think there's a lot of confusion in this space. It's funny. We start the book with it's all about semantics, right? It is truly about semantics. And the key definition that I would make here distinction is semantic layer is not something new. In fact, we're just chatting. It celebrated its 25th year anniversary this year. It's come a long way. I think, and what we mean by semantic layer is we are talking about the shift from the focus from the physical data itself to the data about the data. So the meta aspect of it. So this means abstracting the physical data with definitions, business glossaries, metadata, the aboutness of the data, taxonomies to control some of these vocabularies that are very unique to your organization, what fits under our product, list of services, ontologies to be able to relate those concepts, those vocabularies that you have to your real world entities. This customer owns this product, has bought this product, and needs this type of marketing material or training material. How do you connect these pieces? That's where ontology allows you to explicitly make that machine readable, places things. And then when you apply this model, the semantic model on your assets, and I am collectively going to call going forward data, content, and information and expertise, anything you can append metadata to, knowledge assets, then you have your graph, your knowledge graph. So this is what we mean when we talk about a semantic layer and the components that sit within semantic models. There is another definition of a semantic layer, which comes from the data side, data and analytics, and that we refer to as the metrics layer, because the core purpose or use of that semantic layer is really to define metrics and to connect them. So the biggest difference, I would say, between these two types of semantic layers, we actually have an article in our knowledge database about the tales of the two semantic layers, where the metrics layer is primarily focused on data definitions, not object and concept definitions. And that's a very important distinction. The moment you take a concept or an object, customer, product, revenue, outside of a table or your SQL table, it loses its meaning. And that's really the key thing, is we care about the things inside the cells of your spreadsheets, the objects and concepts and things, as opposed to the table IDs. And that's the key distinction between the metrics layer and the semantic layer that I would make.
Yeah, I love that distinction, because I think a lot of people, there's so much fuss about this in the news these days. I think there will be a lot of new people coming to this. And I think that analytics perspective on the semantic layer is way more common. How do you help people? Like what you just said makes perfect sense, but have you faced the challenge in your consulting practice of helping people make the transition from that? It almost sounds like things, not strings, what you just described, the Google way of saying that. Does that make sense? Yeah.
In depth, and that's exactly it. And I alluded to this earlier especially with the adoption of LLMs and Gen AI and agentic AI. Now there is there's a change and shift in perspective from the data side as well, because it's the value of being able to make this business meaning and concept, or being able to inject what does customer mean in this instance, and giving it, not having to agree on one definition of customer, because no one will agree on one definition of customer, but you would want to be able to make your knowledge about why this customer is different, definition of this customer is different from the other, machine readable in a standardized way. That's what we're calling the context engine, the context for AI. And because of that, I would say just in the past, especially 3 years, we are seeing a lot of investment coming from the data side, the data and AI engineering teams in the semantic layer, and semantic components and semantic models. So to give you an example, for a large retailer, they have over 40,000 stores across different parts of the world. They want to be able to do reporting to leadership about, a store health or the state of the company, the state of a store. And there are multiple things that they need to be calculated within that. So metrics, right? This is a really nice, neat story of how semantics supports the metric layer, and where the data team is investing in the semantic layer to standardize the objects and concepts within their metric layer. So a good example of this is how do they calculate revenue? One of their measures of store health is revenue, or system, or operating system upward downtime. They have multiple things that goes into consideration, but each store has their own version of it. So when all of this is aggregated, it will take them about 5 to 6 months. The report dashboard will be wrong because this analytics team in this region did a certain way, the other did it a certain way. They couldn't trust these decisions. And where the semantic layer came into play is in having these global, very tangibly, metadata and glossary standardization. About when we say store health, what is a part of that, what is profit, what is revenue, just making that mission readable for their analytics team, for their AI team. But larger than that, the biggest value for them was being able to connect using a graph, how each domain relates to one another, how a revenue impacts products, or how products are related to revenue, how operations is related to revenue, which is a unique type of relationship. And making that machine readable using a graph was one of the, we call it like this, delivering semantic layer as a product for them, for the metrics calculations and for their team, which significantly reduced the hunting and gathering they have to do to report out from the 5 to 6 months to I would say 4 or 5 weeks.
That's so interesting. You probably know Veronica Heimsbach. She was on a few episodes ago, and she took something in Norway. She took with a similar architecture from like months to minutes. So, but down to weeks is still quite good. But I love that notion of the semantic layer as a product. Is that sort of how you articulate it now when you're trying to? Because it's not like a thing. It's like a concept, a framework. How do you position it when you're talking to especially to an executive who might not care at all about the technical details under the hood?
Yeah, it is definitely not a product or a tool. That I would start there, because that's where people always like to go and fix the problem. There's not a single product currently that is the semantic layer. It is a framework that allows you to create your semantic layer for your organization. There are some standardized things that by industry that you can use, like the financial services industry has a very mature semantic models that you can adapt. Schema.org has some of the model, that version. The pharmaceutical space has some of that. Those are all great starting places we always use. But when it comes to your organization, going back to revenue for that retailer is going to be very different for a coffee company versus for a pharmaceutical company, even if they both are revenue. So you need a framework to define that for your organization. So the way I would describe it for an executive is think of it as this conceptual model of how you see your world and from the top down, and using that knowledge that you have and making that machine readable so that you can apply it from the bottom up to your knowledge assets and how they are related. You need tools to manage this so that so that you can govern it and manage it and have good data quality checks and so forth. So graph database, taxonomy, ontology, metadata manager, data catalogs, although now we're seeing a big shift within the industry where these vendors, the large enterprise tool solutions like ServiceNow, Salesforce, all of these are acquiring these solutions to make it a part of their suite. At the end of the day, that's actually a whole topic where the world is going to the monolith era. The pendulum is swinging back again to the early 2000s. But needless to say, it's showing how there is a big investment in the semantic layer and having this capability.
Yeah, no, I've done a lot of work with decoupled architectures, and those, kind of modular service-oriented systems make sense. But I see this all in a lot of places, this kind of regression or return to the monoliths. What are the implications of that when you're building a semantic layer? Because as you just mentioned, I inferred from what you just said that like almost every enterprise will have a unique, just everything from vocabularies to taxonomy, everything they do will be unique in some way. What are the kind of practical measures that you take in advising people about these architectures to make sure you kind of fit it right to your organization?
Yeah. The number one thing I would say is interoperability. The promise of the semantic web is all about standards and being able to protect your data from specific solutions of today that may not exist tomorrow. So the idea of the shift from application-centric development, application-centric organization, organizing around your CRM or your CMS or your data lake, to the semantic model, to the data-centric or the asset-centric type of model. So the biggest focus should be interoperability. What that would mean in reality is if you are, there's any organization that is a certain size would have at least at a minimum 5 platforms, if not more. The larger companies have 20 plus, right? Just for one domain. So if you want to be able to the good old traditional problem of I can't find anything, where do we store this? How do we connect this information? You need to be able to get it out of these specific applications, not physically, but at least at that metadata level, at the framework level, to know that it exists. So in order to do that, you need some way of having this system talk to this other system. And that's really where standards, a way of building these semantic layers using RDF, the Semantic Web Standards, Resource Description Framework, or OWL or Shackle for governance. They are well-known, well-mature ways of architecting and developing the solution. That said, there are other like LPG type of like the Neo4j type of solutions that also could plug into this from a graph standpoint. We can come back to that later, but I would emphasize on building your semantic solutions on standards is going to pay off not only for the issues or the problems you're looking to solve for today, but also the problems we are not anticipating about that where the vendor space would end up in the next couple of years.
Right. I mean, I think you can lump everything you just said under vendor lock-in, which seems like a good way to get. But what you just said, I just want to do one little quick sidebar. The 2 episodes ago, I had on Aurel Asla and Adrian Geschwend talking about RDF 1.2, and I'm wondering that if your advice to consulting clients about that choice of a labeled property graph versus an RDF-based knowledge graph, will that change much with the introduction of RDF 1.2?
You know, it remains to be seen, I would say. Aura is a friend and a great thought leader in this space, and has been actually investing a lot of his time in making the bridge between RDF and LPG. I don't know if you remember, like 5 years ago or so, there was RDF Star. There was
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Right. So now I think it's still developing. It's in the process, but at the end of the day, the real world application of this is it shouldn't be a choice. In many of our implementations, especially for large organizations, we have both, because they serve very different use cases. To give you an example, for a financial services firm, the RDF defines their kind of global domains, upper ontologies and standards, definitions, and relationships, whereas LPG is pulling some of those standard domains that they need to disambiguate and resolve entities within their graph, but are using their analytics graph in LPG, which is highly performant and fit for purpose for those types of investigative analytics types of use cases and fraud detection and so forth. So that's usually the scenario we see, is that many organizations have both. In retail is another one that we see that hop from, RDF defines the standards, the facts, the relationships, whereas LPG takes that and does the analytics and the processing on the ground. So I don't think it's a choice. I would love to see. We have some libraries that we've built to do this hop, especially with agents now, from LPG to RDF, RDF to LPG. So I see promise that that's becoming less and less challenging, and is going to disappear as a debate. I think, where it's no longer which way do we go.
There wasn't, maybe not consensus, but there was a lot of thoughts that echoed what you just said at the Knowledge Graph conference this year. That's kind of how it feels. Hey, one thing I'm hoping that people will tune into this podcast who are curious about a semantic layer and want to do it right. And I've heard you talk a few times about the things you can do, sort of the cautionary tales about how it can go wrong. Can you talk a little bit about that, just for folks who are thinking about it, to make sure they get it right the first time?
That's a great question. So we have, at this point, over the last decade, I would say we've done over 200 engagements in this space. And if I was to do a wide scan of very many different maturity levels, some organizations are nascent, some are more mature and advanced. I would say the common thread that I see and I would pull for failed efforts is it starts with a tool. That's a technology of sorts. And from a technical standpoint, this almost always fails, because the whole point of semantics is bringing the business lens to your knowledge assets and to your data. And you can always start from the top down or the bottom up through your corpus. That's from a delivery standpoint. There are different ways to slice this. However, the biggest failure rate that we see is when you start from a very technical problem. So we find that you need to always take it up a level to what we call your competency questions. What business questions are you looking to answer? Because at the end of the day, the core value of a semantic solution, semantic layer, is making your business knowledge machine readable, contextualized, and standardized across your knowledge assets. So that's the number one thing. So that pocket of the organization that is very technical, that would be top of my list, which in a way leads into the second piece, which is around skill sets and leadership support. over the past few years, we see a lot of efforts fail because they were focused on a given technology, maybe not executed fully. So there's the sentiment that it doesn't work. It's a lot of effort. Traditional engineering does not have the skill sets in-house, although now it's very promising to see a lot of trainings in the semantic space. We have our Knowledge Graph University as well that is getting a lot of traction. So there is now interest from the traditional engineers and data engineering side to learn semantics as well. So that I would see would be diminishing, especially with AI and assisted with agents. I think that's going to be improving the adoption rate as well. But that traditionally, especially over the past few years, has been a barrier to entry and failed. They're one of the reasons why these efforts fail.
Nice. Yeah, and that's both of those are interesting. Again, at the Knowledge Graph conference this year, it came up that there's more interest from different engineers. That it's been kind of not insular, but like it's been a lot of us talking to each other, and there's a lot of. It was really gratifying actually to see how many new people were at the conference. So that's really interesting. Hey, one thing I wanted to also ask. I saw you on a panel discussion online a couple months ago, I think, where you talked about, they were talking about the universal semantic layer. And I wonder, does that get it, like, is that a distinction, is that a useful distinction to draw, or was that just the topic of that conversation?
I would say it's more of the latter. The one thing that I would call out that distinction that it makes is it's really hard to define, especially for large organizations, like one enterprise semantic layer. So what we typically see is you start going through kind of like this T-shaped approach of what are the domains that are applicable across the board, regardless of where you are within that organization. And this is, we are working with a consultancy, for instance, that has 60,000 offices across the world. So what are those core domains that are applicable to that? Think region, location, departments, services, industry, like the things that are shared across the board. That is what you start defining as your universal layer. And then after that, as you go down levels of the concepts, then you would want to be able to give freedom to different groups to do their own thing. Some pull from the semantic layer as a product model comes into play, some embedded within their operations. As you go down the concepts level, like from universal to upper ontology to domain ontology, like to the schema, then that freedom, you need that freedom to these specific groups, like the group level, the Wild West, for this to be adapted. So that it's kind of a design decision, an implementation approach, and an implementation decision, and to make it usable for large organizations.
That's it. It sounds like there's emerging design patterns in these architectures. You just said mirrors almost exactly what Eric Little from Accenture has said, and very close to what Alex Bertice at Netflix talks about. That's it. I guess so. It's unique to each organization, but it does sound like there's some high-level patterns emerging that enterprise architects can fall back on, because they must be. Well, I guess I don't want to go too much deeper into it because we don't have a lot of time left, but that AI is a driver of all of this. Like that all of a sudden you mentioned, I think right at the very start, how the data folks are driving a lot of this. Is it because they all of a sudden have 4 or 5 times as much data because all of a sudden they're also getting all the unstructured data?
Exactly. Exactly. In fact, actually, this starts getting into the emerging trends that we're seeing in architecture, to your point, which is one aspect of this is AI is ubiquitous in every solution that you have, even if it's like a legacy system. ADP has ADP Assist. They're investing in that. Snowflake has chat with your data. Workday has chat with your HR, right? So adoption is no longer an option. That's number one. So there's a big driver here by itself that AI is happening. Even these solutions that you've had for 20 years are embracing it. So now you have to work with it. That's the biggest shift. The second thing is our design architecture is no longer just for humans. We are also designing for machines. So there's a very different level of architecting that you would have to think about. Humans need intuitive ways to receive information. Machines need granularity and context. So your architecture needs to reflect that. So that's another big shift that we're seeing within enterprise architecture. And then the third piece is it starts getting into this context, right? So when you talk about machines, now you need some way to convey your organizational context and meaning and business definitions. And that's where the semantic and context layer is becoming a big investment. I think you may have seen this. Gartner earlier this year has said that every organization by 2030 is going to have a semantic layer. And the way we define it, Gartner has also come around. Which is great to see. So that's the third piece. And then the fourth piece, this is a big other change is this lines of artificial silos between data, to your point about structured, unstructured, is very quickly disappearing, which is why we've been talking about this concept of knowledge assets. It doesn't matter if it's data or structured or unstructured. AI really doesn't care, especially, but it needs to consume it a certain way. So that is leading to the fifth emerging thing we're seeing, operating model changes, which is teams are many organizations are going through reorgs if you look around today. And we have lived through 3 or 4 just in the past 2 years, the good type, where the data team is merging with the engineering, AI, and KM team, and now they're a cross-functional team under a COO or like a managing director. Or their organizations are actively changing their operating model, which is also leading to how we manage security entitlements, because AI, typically we manage that at the group or application level. We're now talking about the concept and data level, which semantics and context is all about. So now we need to upgrade our security and management entitlements to mirror the same. So architecture, I know that was a lot, but if you talk about architecture, knowledge, data, AI architecture, these are the factors that are driving the biggest change. And we are seeing, I would say, 3, maybe 4 types of architectural patterns emerging as a result of that. I have some articles that we published with our architects on our knowledge base. I can share the link so you can.
I'll put that in the show notes for sure. That's awesome. I love. It's like we saved the best for last. I'm going to leave this in as clickbait. I'm really curious about the engagement level in this one. I'm going to tease this to death. That be sure to listen, because really be sure to listen all the way to the end. Lulit saved the best stuff. But we are coming up close to time. But I want to, before we wrap up, is there anything you want to revisit from the conversation, or just want to make sure we share before we close?
I would say I think I would go back to the world as we know it is very fastly changing, right? And these are a lot of the drivers that are leading to how we think about our data, our content, our knowledge, and bringing it all together. Also a note to the title of the book is really something that we've been championing for the past 10 years as a company, but also as practitioners throughout. And it's really neat to see it catching on. And with that is also coming a lot of noise in this space. I would emphasize, always ask and look for standards, interoperability as new tools and new solutions are emerging, which is really neat to see. But also, I think it's really hard to be an executive and a decision maker in this space right now. I would empathize. I live through it with many executives who are, in a way, going through decision paralysis because of a lot of this movement. But I think the core and anchor of this would be focus on your knowledge assets, focus on abstracting your context and your meaning of your business, and a way to apply that in a standardized format to your machines and applications would be the way to go.
I love that. That echoes something I jotted down something you said. I can't remember where, but you said semantics isn't just a layer, it's the lens through which AI sees your world. And what you just said, yeah, completely supports that. Well, thanks so much, Lee. Oh, one very last thing. If folks want to connect with you online, what's the best way to find you?
LinkedIn, for my full name, I should be findable. I can also share some information in my email as well.
Okay, great. Oh, I'll put that in the show notes as well. Well, thank you so much, Lulit. This was an awesome conversation.
Thank you, Larry. It was really fun. I'm glad we got to do this.
For show notes and to sign up for our newsletter, visit our website at knowledgegraphinsights.com. And please rate and review us on your favorite podcast platform. Thank you for listening.